Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Adam Lang. Small business is so incredibly important to the Australian economy, contributing billions of dollars every year and providing employment to so many. But it's been a tough few years for small to medium-sized enterprises, better known as SMEs. From the uncertainty of the pandemic right through to the extreme shortage of workers and rising costs, the challenges are significant. So how do small business owners cope? And more than that, how do they keep growing when conditions are pretty tough? Paul Presland is ANZ's General Manager, Small Business. Paul, welcome to Fear and Greed.
G'day, Adam. Great to be with you and looking forward to the chat today.
Oh, me too. Thanks again for joining us. So if the pandemic has shown us anything, it's that businesses need to be prepared for the unexpected. How do they do that financially? A pandemic is pretty much a worst case scenario. You get other challenges, but this has been a severe one. How do they prepare financially?
I think it's always a challenge because if you're running a small business, it can be a lonely existence. And so those that have been really successful are those that have thought about probably four key things, in my opinion. One is obviously making the most of the available government support, and we saw that play out through the various stages of the lockdowns. Understanding your risk, having a plan and planning ahead, and then obviously talking to your financial provider, talking to your bank and engaging them in the narrative in terms of what's happening and what you're seeing and what help you need. Really important.
I suppose that solitary nature of the challenges too, even if you're not technically working alone, it can feel very lonely. And as you mentioned, knowing who to call and that you should call to get some help is just such an important thing to do. Did you find your customers doing that during the pandemic?
I think those that were confident enough to have that conversation were ones that fared better than those that didn't. And I think what was really important, we found that it was a good opportunity for us to reach out to our customer base and talk in a more informed way about that. And I think those customers who had those conversations are certainly, this is the time to engage your banker and to tell them that what's happening and what help you need. Because again, you can come up with a solution and obviously have a partner who can help you build the way ahead. I think, one of the things is how do you have that conversation so that it's a trusted relationship? And I think that's the role that many banks can play in this kind of environment. So
did you and your team at ANZ take that proactive approach during COVID and even now, initiating contact with your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. There is so much data floating around, as everyone talks about that right now, and it's not about the case of being Big Brother, but taking the opportunity to talk regularly to customers about what's happening in their world, in their industry, or what's happening in terms of change in their circumstances. So we made a particular effort to double down on those interactions with customers. And again, as I said, those customers that you end up having conversations with, you can then talk about what the solutions are. Is it debt deferral, or is it restructuring their finances, or is it cash flow assistance? What are the things that you need in order to help get through? And every industry, and frankly, in every geography, we had multiple speeds economies across the country, as you well know. And so I think that's been the interesting challenge for customers as well. And again, getting those conversations happening has been really, really helpful, I think.
That making that first point of contact can be so important. And so if you come down to those sort of older expressions like a rainy day fund, saving money or having things stocked away just in case, how much of a rainy day fund should businesses have? Is it based on being able to fund your operations for a certain amount of time without known revenue coming in? Is that the sort of thing businesses should be looking at?
Well, I guess so. What I would say is, when you're thinking about I need extra funds, be really clear on why you need them. Do you need them to fund your cash flow? Do you need them to buy stock? Is it because your creditors are slow? What's the reason and rationale behind that? Or is it to take advantage of opportunity? First, figure out why you need the money, and then you can start talking about that. The answer is not always finance. It might be bringing in a partner into your business. It might be negotiating longer credit terms with your suppliers. It might be increasing your access to the marketplace. Without doing too much of a sell, one of the things that we found really useful for our customers, and again, we can help point customers to this. So we've got a financially ready business hub, which has got a break-even calculator, a cash flow forecast, so you can know how much you really need when you want to have a play around with those sort of things. So that we've found that very helpful.
Stay with me, Paul. We'll be back in a minute. I'm speaking to Paul Presland, ANZ's General Manager, Small Business. In terms of the longer term effects, and some of those are still playing out, what do you think, or what are you seeing as some of the longer term effects of the pandemic on small businesses in Australia? As you mentioned multi-speed before, are some standing better than others?
Oh, yes, I think so. Yeah, the employment question's an interesting one. Unemployment rate is low, but underemployment is high, and yet we know that supply chain is difficult, and we know that there's plenty of opportunities in hospitality. If anyone's out there buying a coffee in whichever capital city you're in, you'll see signs up for baristas and the like. So the access to talent and employment and a good workforce is a real challenge, particularly in restaurants and hospitality. And the other pieces is around supply chain. I live in Melbourne, and the note went out the other day that apparently dim sims are in short supply because again they can't get access to the stock to get it moving along. So there's all sorts of pieces playing out. And as you say, there are different speeds. If you're over in the west, things are a bit stronger, and so I think we're starting to see the larger East Coast cities starting to come back as well now.
Right. Now, sadly, not all businesses made it, right? And so each one of those can be an incredibly emotional and stressful story for those businesses involved. Not every business succeeds in normal circumstances as well, but did the pandemic just speed that up?
It's interesting. I mean, we actually found not really. I mean, it sounds a terrible thing to say, but businesses that were going to fail probably did fail. And I think that those that accessed the support that was available to them actually managed to either mothball their operations or shore up things along the way. And I mentioned before hospitality. I think that was an interesting dynamic, how that moves to the suburbs rather than, the CBD. If you're in the CBDs of Melbourne or Sydney in particular, obviously that's a much different narrative. But I think overall, we've actually seen our customer base hold up pretty well, surprisingly. And I think that's a fact of our customers really knowing their business and understanding those things. I think that's been quite dynamic.
So in terms of the dynamic looking ahead, we talked earlier about the challenges small to medium-sized enterprises are facing now, including labour shortages, inflationary pressures, supply chain issues, and they're just some of them. Are you sensing amongst your customers an anxiety in the small business community now that they just don't know how the forward period is going to look and how this is all going to play out?
I think customers are cautious. I think the interest rate cycle changing has made customers perhaps be a little bit more thoughtful in terms of before they wade in to do a big investment, buy a property rather than rent it, buy some more stock and equipment. We're seeing that customers' use of their overdraft facilities or, in fact, their cash reserves are still holding up pretty strongly, and overdraft facility usage is lower than it normally would have been. And our overall sense when talking to customers is more about, we're okay, things are going okay, but we're not ready to step in and make a bigger commitment right at the moment until we see how things play out. And I guess this is part of the, what's going to happen with rates, and therefore is it giving me the confidence piece? And you see a lot of data on that in terms of what, consumer confidence looks like, but spending is still pretty high. So it's a little bit choppy at the moment.
Okay. So within that choppiness, and I mentioned some of the things that people might feel cautious about, but are you starting to see some things that are people being excited about, like people starting to have a go, like this changing period can bring out some of the very best in businesses?
It's so true. I mean, there are a raft of opportunities for customers to take advantage of, as I said before, is either purchasing their property where they run their business from or bringing it together or consolidating or expansion. That we're starting to see those customers that have got a plan, that are organised, that understand, as I said before, their cash flow really well, that they're making strategic choices in terms of how can they take advantage of this point in the cycle. And I think you see that no matter what it is, but I think it's exacerbated by, this unique period in history that we've just been through, obviously. So yes, playing out.
In terms of, having a plan, you mentioned that there, and people, I guess, focusing on their plan and looking ahead, and financial literacy. Financial literacy is something that we hear a lot about in terms of education of children, businesses, so on. Are you sensing that customers are getting better at having a plan and including financial literacy in their in their operations?
Yes, I think so. Look, as an industry, banking's got a responsibility to also step into that space as well. And so, that's something that we've been really focused on in engaging our customers to have more conversations around these are the things that you should be thinking about. These are the tools that are available to you. And most small businesses, as I said before, it can be a lonely existence. So who do you speak to? You might not necessarily be confident enough to speak to your bank because they might want something from you, rather than the fact that having that engaging conversation. You'll go to the government website, you'll talk to friends and family. But accessing those sort of resources can be really helpful for you in terms of thinking that through. Being financially ready for the different periods in the cycle so you can invest or think through any of those challenges moving forward. I talked about that financially ready hub that we have, and example is there are articles on cybersecurity. That's the big thing right now. We've seen all those cybersecurity issues in recent weeks and months. How do you protect yourself in that kind of environment? What are you doing about future business planning? And again, I probably word count on this, but cash flow forecasting is super important. Many customers, they think through around, I sold something, I made a profit, all is good to go. But understanding how the cash flow cycle works is something that when it comes to business failure, that's usually where people get things wrong. It's not that they run out of ideas or making profit, but they run out of cash flow. And that's why it's so important to have those conversations.
And Paul, you see across the data in your business so much in the business community, but a question perhaps on you and your work as ANZ's General Manager Small Business. What are you most excited about in the year ahead?
It's interesting. As I said before, I think small business is such an exciting part of the economy. It's the engine room of the economy, and there are so many great conversations with customers. And I think getting out and talking to customers, I think the last few years we're used to talking over through a computer to one another and all those other sort of things. Getting out and talking to customers about how they are thinking about great ideas. And there are so many entrepreneurs out there who've got so many great plans, and how can we work to assist them and help them to grow? So that's what I'm really excited about. I think actually the Australian economy has held up really well, and we can see that with the pressure on interest rates. But I think it's just that great chance for some people to make something of themselves and actually to grow that part of the business and the economy. So for me, getting out and having those conversations with customers, that's what myself and my team are really focused on over the next little while.
Paul, that's great advice. Look after your cash flow and work out where you can have a go.
That's it.
Paul, thank you very much for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thanks again.
That was Paul Presland, ANZ's General Manager, Small Business. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Adam Lang. Enjoy your day.